G'day and kia ora everybody, wherever you're listening in from. Glad to have you on board. It's Brendan here, and we've got Doug and Hayden with us today. We're on this live event for Specialised Admixtures for control and durability. And what I'm going to do right now is share the slide deck. I promise you it's not death by slide deck. It's a very short one today. So everybody see that, all right? And please let me know if you can't hear. So the agenda covers the benefits of specialised liquid admixtures for batching plants and for site teams and for the asset owner. So it's a win-win-win situation we'd like to talk about. And Hayden and Doug, you've probably met before, particularly if you've been on our previous events. They're based in the Napier office in New Zealand. They'll introduce themselves as they join the conversation. And you can submit your questions at any time on the chat or question tabs. It all helps with the flow of the conversation as we go along. And we've got a question for you. You can put your answer to this at any time, but we're going to circle back to it right at the end of the session. What's your number one challenge in concrete production or construction? So if you could give that some thought, we'd like to hear about it a little later on. Hayden, I think you're going to take us away on this.
Thanks, Brendo, and yeah, good morning, good evening, wherever streaming in from. So yeah, good to be on another one of these. And like Brendan said, Hayden Prestidge out of the New Zealand office. But that question's interesting. What's the number one challenge in construction and production of current ready mix? And it's a question we've been going around asking probably for the last 3 months or more of all the major players in the industry, ready mix and the construction side. And it's been very interesting that there is a changing scene in concrete, and obviously this drive towards greener, reduced carbon, etc. And it is changing dynamics, changing thoughts, and whether we're keeping up with the play, and whether there's systems that we don't know about that can help us be better, etc. So yeah, keen to be part of this session. And as always, love questions. That's where the magic happens on these sessions. We've got more interaction and real chat. So keen to just keep those busy as we go through. But yeah, just wanted to really talk about the realities of a changing industry and just dive into a couple of these points of what we're seeing. Obviously, we've got, and some of you will be familiar with this even from our past webinars and things, but we're seeing a little bit of disconnect between those setting expectations and milestones, etc. Governing bodies, authorities, even companies chasing Green Star, etc. But then what that means, the disconnect between the actual people on the ground working with the concrete, producing the concrete, placing the concrete, those expectations are different. It's a different product coming through. We've got cement replacements, etc. Doesn't behave exactly the same as good old GP concrete as we hear it in the industry. So a lot around the batching and placement. There's quite a bit of difference we're seeing in reaction times, strength development, bleed, workability, open life, how long we've got its slump retention. All those sort of things are changing scenes, and we may not be familiar or trained on how to deal with this new product coming through. The consistency of performance has been a topic. It's quite interesting going through Australia, New Zealand, UK as well. As are we matching consistency? Are we getting the same every time, same results? So it's been a good topic, and then there is some lingering concerns around the durability, of these new mixes. What happens in 5, 10, 20, 50 years time, when we've got a whole lot of cement replacement? Are we 100% sure that we're going to meet the design life, etc.? So it's some of the things that we're seeing. I'll be really interested, those on the call, what you're seeing as well. The realities of the changing industry, but I think we can all agree it is changing. So let's be up to date with what's some good principles and good practices to make it better. So And you're over to Doug Hamlin.
Thanks, Aidan. Yeah, and I guess just on that, the overarching or overall, it's a very positive move that the industry is making to reduce that carbon footprint. Obviously, cement's a very high contributor in this space, and overall, it's very positive. It's just these few challenges and things that would need to be addressed so that the market as a whole jumps on board and starts using these concretes. So yeah, I'm Doug Hamlin. I've been with Markham around about 14 years now, based alongside Hayden in the New Zealand office. Our last webinar, we got a few bits of feedback around focusing on specifics, specific products for challenges. What are the actual problems we solve as such. So what we've done here is listed out some of the main ones that we're working on, that we're working with clients on, and for your benefit, so you can start thinking about whether there's use in your whether you're a ready-mix supplier or whether you're a government department, council, whatever it may be, trying to achieve these low carbon numbers. So yeah, first of all, starting there is the use of slag. So the issues around with slag cement is typically low early strength, so it takes a while to react and hydrate and start forming that calcium silicate hydrate, versus your standard Portland GP cement is acting much faster, and that's what everybody's used to. So whereas a normal cement, a GP cement, you might better strike your formwork or lift precast panels on day one. It could be pushed out somewhere between 1 to 3 days with slag. So being able to boost that early strength, and ensure that durability stays there, and also that the workability of the product as well. So that kind of flows into that next point there. Some of these mixes do become different, harder to place, depending on who you talk to. They do behave differently, so they do bleed at different rates, different times. They may not be as easy to pump and place. So looking at enhancing that workability through an admixture, making it act as close as we can to a standard GP concrete. Waterproofing and durability, so much the same as you would in traditional construction. So being able to increase things like the chloride resistance, the resistance to water penetration in the concrete, pushing that service life out as long as possible, stopping moisture getting to the reinforcing steel. Pump aid is another area there. So when you're pumping maybe height, decent height or over long distances, to be able to keep that concrete together and cohesive, but also so it pumps nicely, and you're not having to wind the pump pressure up, and put your pumps and your gear through duress there. So being able to increase, I guess, the lubricity of the concrete, so it places more like a standard concrete there, or better, makes life easier for everybody, which we'll touch on in the next few slides. With calcined clay, so that's a reasonably new, it has been around for years, but hasn't been really looked at due to costs and things. Starting to become more of a topic now, but it is very water hungry, so it does increase your water demand, which obviously has impacts on workability, strength gains, all those things. So we've got options there to increase that workability and make sure we're not losing any of that performance there. Silica fume replacement, so silica fume is becoming more scarce. There's also issues around how it's handled at the plants, so it's got safety concerns being a powdered silica product, but looking at whether we can replace that with a liquid admixture, lots easier to handle, safer to handle, and more consistent in terms of how you can dose it on site. HS2 resistance is an interesting one there. So obviously with some of these concretes, particularly slag, you are getting a higher durability concrete, but being able to improve that even further and get that durability earlier on than you would, so you're not having to wait till your 56, 90 day time period to be able to get those average strengths and usability of the concrete. Fly ash replacement, the few issues there, particularly around with the closing of coal-fired power stations and things. We are looking at alternative sources now, so things like pond ash, older lower grades of fly ash that were typically dumped are being reused now, or pulled out of the ground. And there are some issues here with activation of this, so it's not as fast as the higher grades. So yeah, whether we can essentially increase that reactivity from earlier on and get that product used in concrete, because it does have that low carbon benefit there. And lastly, the efflorescence. So this is more around bricks and masonry production. So particularly when you're doing more vibrant sort of darker colours, you can have issues with the salt coming out of the concrete and causing visual markings, that type of thing, and being able to stop that and getting a more consistent, higher quality product, which obviously has that initial visual benefit, but being able to stop that happening right from day one you get a longer lasting product as well. So yeah, that should give you a brief overview of some of the areas we're looking at. It is extensive, and there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle here. But yeah, that hopefully helps in outlining some of those there. Over to you, Hayden.
Thanks, Douglas. No, I agree. They're probably the main things that we've had in conversation. So I'd love to hear from on this call if there's anything else that's pressing, or if that resonates, and in what way, to be good. But now we just want to focus in on the batching side, the actual production of ready mix and some of these newer mixes, and how the colloidal silica liquid admixtures are helpful in this thing. And I really want to bring it down to two areas. Well, one really is your reduction of risk. There's so much pressure on ready mix producers, and they're carrying a lot of weight as far as risk goes. And how do we get that into the best position so we're a reduction of risk, but we're relying on some others to take on some of that space and ease that pain. So what we're really seeing is quality control as a big one. Safety first, we'll go there. So there's a lot of powders, and obviously cement is the bad boy in the industry, but then the crystalline type powders, for just purely for labourers putting product in, how are we controlling that, and how are we maximising our safety requirements there. And then quality control is what I want to really dive into next, is important. When we have to manually dose products, when we have to back up to a different stand, put in powdered products, put in different bags, etc. Are we really capturing, as our process is right, and do we know what's actually going in the mix? At 2 a.m. in the morning when the trucks are coming thick and fast, pours are going crazy, are we getting it right? Versus a liquid type admixture that can be plumbed in and through the batching system and just comes up through your mix design. It's all recorded on your data and your batching sheets, etc. So there's a real key point there. And then just the simplicity of it really, which probably ties that together, with really finding and having some good feedback in the industry of liquids versus powders. The ability to move, store, batch, those sort of things, the safety of them, and then getting them into the right place. But is there anything else to add on that one, Doug, do you think?
No, that's covered it well. Thanks.
over to you then on what the site teams get.
Rightio. So as Hayden's mentioned, there's obviously the safety, simplicity of batching, that type of thing. That really extends in principle to when you're placing on site. So with these type of admixtures, you're not seeing the same workability issues. You're not seeing the sticky concrete. We've heard a story recently about a site team pumping a high SEM mix and literally getting stuck in the concrete with the gumboots, not being able to move around. So that's not good when you're trying to screed and rake and place a concrete, level of concrete. So what colloidal silica does, fastening on that type of admixture for now, it helps retain that moisture in the concrete. So it makes it more lubricated essentially. So your moisture isn't being taken away from, say if you've got like a powdered admixture, which would draw the water away from the mix and make it drier, more sticky. These admixtures, they are liquid to start with, so they've got their own moisture, so to speak. And then once they're mixing in the concrete, they actually retain that moisture within a type of a gel. And what that's doing is essentially setting up more cement paste within that concrete in those early stages. So it makes it lots easier. Everybody knows if you get a high cement concrete, you're getting a much creamier mix to work with. And that's what we're seeing with these admixtures. So you're getting, lots easier to place, especially where you've got things like high microsilica doses, that type of thing. And then some of these slag concretes have similar issues with, being able to place it, push it around on site, that type of thing. Another benefit there, which really relates to the overall quality of the concrete. So workability, I believe, is very important to getting a high quality concrete. And along with that, being able to retain that moisture in the concrete helps with that drying shrinkage reduction. So you're holding that moisture in the concrete so that it can hydrate that cement. It's not, evaporating out into the atmosphere. So yeah, essentially a twofold benefit there. You're getting a easier concrete to place, which results in a higher quality job. And then you're getting less cracking and things like that on site. So that result from month one in front of the client is much better than it is without addressing these challenges. Is that fair, Hayden?
Yeah, it's good. And probably just to add on there, even the ability to close, finish, get a good surface has been recognised in all aspects, even like shotcrete, where traditionally has sometimes been a challenge. So no, it's good. There's definitely some benefits, and we want to make sure that the site teams are getting first trained of what's going to come through the pipe, and then they're getting the best result. Because, like Doug said, that's 100% the start or the key of long-term durability, which probably rolls into our next slide, Brendan. And really now looking at what does the asset owner themselves get out of all this, and that's the key part. You see some, roading authorities or governing bodies or whatever it is, construction companies, etc., ready-mix companies, they're setting the guidelines, the outline brief, so to speak. And our job is to help make concrete the best it can be to hit those milestones that are put out. And for an asset, our long-term durability is huge. Obviously, no one wants to spend months and dollars on repairs, repair cycles, etc. So there should not be any reduction of quality and durability while we're chasing sustainability. And that's probably, if you dive back into a couple of our recent webinars and material, you'll see that message coming through. But that's really our focus: how to extend life of concrete without going away from this drive to get more sustainable. So that's a big one, is how to get these goals and ensure we're getting the right concrete, right result. And then protection from within is really where it starts. If we're getting the right quality concrete, that's the long-term protection from day one. You're densifying, you're really making the matrix of the concrete the best it can be. Not only that, but the surface as well. When you're talking about abrasion resistance, etc., you really want to think about the long term. And that's probably our biggest focus area for the asset owner is making sure they get their carbon reduction thereafter, but they get the quality thereafter as far as durability. Trust that helps. Keen for any questions. We've been talking a lot. We'll get to the question side very soon, but over back to you, Doug.
Yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, I 100% agree. We've got to make sure that doesn't suffer that long-term durability. So, you know, if we want a win-win situation here. So far as looking at areas, again, some of the feedback on the last webinar was to look at case studies and, you know, actual projects and things like that. A lot of this area with carbon reduction is fairly, I guess, new, and when we're dealing with commercially sensitive clients and projects and that type of thing. So we can't share, you know, actual examples of projects, but we can give you examples of, you know, the types of projects we work on. And we would strongly encourage you to come and discuss or come and have a discussion with us around the, you know, how we can benefit these low carbon, whether that's low carbon mixes, whether that's from a asset owner point of view, how to implement them into your projects, that type of thing, or whether that's from a ready mix, or whether that's from a concrete placer, you know, working out how we get this concrete down on the ground and supporting our structures. So firstly, the marine and coastal is an area we've done a lot of work in terms of extending service life. So working against steel corrosion, predominantly from chloride attack in the concrete. The roading and highways area, so getting that long-term durability, particularly around carbonation and roading is the bigger topic. And, you know, while that's a slow attack, it does break down that concrete microstructure and eventually attack the steel. And, you know, you can do that from day one with admixtures, protect that concrete from those sorts of attacks. Mining, construction, the emphasis there really is on protection against the processing chemicals there, the acids, hypersaline water, high mineral water, and, you know, it all leaches the good stuff out of concrete, and being able to protect that from happening, make it last longer, along with the ease of placing. So you've got concrete pours happening underground, which could be, you know, 1 to 2 hours open time for the concrete, and being able to have an admixture that increases the durability but also doesn't create any problems around set times and, you know, strength gain, all those type of things, is we've seen some big successes there. Placement of shotcrete and sprayed concrete, we touched on it earlier, but, you know, being able to reduce those pump pressures, being able to finish it off easier, less, you know, bounce back, less, you know, concrete coming off the walls, rebound is the word I'm looking for, from the walls when you're spraying shotcrete. Again, similar sort of idea, but in piling mixes where you're wanting to keep the mix cohesive and workable, keep it together. So with a piling mix, you often get issues with groundwater and, you know, bleed water from the mix, segregating the concrete, and being able to resist those and keep it together is very important there. Ultra flat floors, so, you know, increasing that abrasion resistance, making sure we're not losing any of that surface durability is an area we can help with. And lastly, it's more your area, Hayden, but top deck waterproofing,
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot of waterproofing type products out there, but it's one thing that's probably gained a lot of traction, and it'd be interesting to see if anyone's involved with this on the call. But, you know, where it's traditionally been membranes coatings type approach to these, you know, top deck type waterproofing, the ability to go integral waterproof the concrete itself has proven some really good results. So it's another benefit of doing this system, something that can't be reversed, something that can't wear, etc. So yeah, that's some of the areas we work in, and I trust that's helpful to provoke some thoughts. I'm never a big fan of webinars being sales pitches as such, so don't get us wrong there. We have had feedback to go into a little bit more detail about what these products do, so hence why we're diving into that space. But that's really getting us to the end now. Please plenty of our voices. Keen to hear your voice. In summary, we obviously with chlorosilica fans, everything we're built off is really based on that technology. We've had such an experience with it, and it's well recognised in the industry now, and some good, really good wins, like we've just been saying. So, a big focus around that, being the liquid, etc. Maximise benefit and minimise risk is huge. Risk is becoming more and more. Project teams are passing around risk. Really, we're trading risk into construction. How do we minimise that, but get the right result? And then really looking to include or be early in discussion on projects, mixed designs, new movements towards different binders, cement replacements, etc. How do we maximise what we're trying to do, get it to the best place, get it into the construction arena rightly and performing well? So hopefully that summarises roughly what we went through, but yeah, keen to hear any thoughts and dive into that question. If we can just ask that now, it'd be really interesting if anyone wants to come forward. What is the number one challenge, if you had to write it in a line, in concrete production or concrete construction? Be really interesting. Throw some thoughts around there. Wait a minute as they come through. Sure. And any other question? Anything we've touched on? We sort of ran through that higher level. So if there's anything, through that you're interested in, or we'll also fire out a bit of a summary where you can come back with any questions on email, etc. Keen to chat through. So I know everyone's got busy schedules.
Do you have any general questions? Did you want to say a little bit more about the permanency, Hayden, of the admixtures, the benefits?
Yeah, we probably never dived into exactly what chlorosilica is doing in the concrete. What we're really doing is growing more calcium silicate hydrate or hydrate in the cement better. We're pore blocking to a point, but we're growing more CSH in the concrete and making it the best it can be. Because of that, it's really, we're not able to reverse that. Once that's happening, once it's set up in the concrete, you can't reverse that. So that's the permanency of it, really. So you've got advantages of chlorosilica based type products in production and construction, but then long term, because of its ability to hold up and resist wear, resist contaminants, moisture migration. Basically, if you can take moisture out of the equation of most of the things concrete, you're on a win as far as getting the best life out of it. So yeah, I think we've got a couple of people typing with some questions. So half a second.
Very good.
Good to go, or are we going to wait here?
It's all right. A couple of the guests are typing, so looking for that to come in.
Fine. Any other points we haven't chatted about, Doug? Got this one. Actually, one thing I'd be interested to ask: what is a webinar topic that you guys would like to see? We roll these out monthly. If there's any either email or in the chat now, would be helpful too. But when we email out for feedback, be really keen. Say, can you hone in on this topic, or like to have a bit of a discussion about this topic? Would be really good. Anything concrete related.
No, I don't. I think you've covered it well there, Hayden. I guess the other area as a company, one of our big values is evolving. So, when we're working with these mixes, we definitely want to be part of a journey. We're not trying to just say, here's a product that will fix all your problems. It's more about, hey, let's try these two or three products, see what works. Let's refine it. Let's get to a point of a dose rate, a product, everything that works for everyone there. And that's something that's very much appreciated by clients. We get that feedback a lot.
It's got some feedback there from Locke, which is much appreciated. Regard to Markham CNS liquid products versus powdered waterproofing products. The Markham product, Locke says, does produce a better concrete to mix and pump and place and finish.
Yeah, it's we're not out to beg. Some of these products have been around for a long time, but concrete does change, production does change, and that's probably our message really is let's stay ahead of the curve making sure we're over all of the right systems. So yeah, agree. We're seeing that, there's some very good ways of getting a waterproof concrete through different products. But can we get that consistency right from production through to finishing? I think it's a good comment. Thanks.
Yeah. I suppose it's one of the things we've seen in the industry is that the changes have, I wouldn't say taken people by surprise exactly, but they've been, the newer mixes are perhaps more different than people were expecting them to be. And they need to be taken into account when you're training your places.
Yep, agree. Good. To wrap us up, Brenda.
Yeah, I think we'll probably wrap up there if we've got no more thoughts. Thank you, everybody. We will, of course, send you out a follow-up email with the contact details and a survey link, and you can tell us what you would like to see that we could improve. And yeah, as Hayden says, we'd be really keen to know any particular topics that you'd like to talk about or particular challenges. It's always fodder for these sessions. We love it.
Good. Thanks all. Thanks for joining. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Markham, adding life to concrete.